So when planning the 8th grade year, or year 3 of the MYP, I wanted to focus on the theme of famous artists. I started by making a list of all the famous artists I wanted to include. I tried to include people from multiple countries, multiple time periods, and multiple mediums. I was thinking of skills that would be required for the DP program, like comparative study. So I made my first student on comparative study from the 8th grade perspective. Secondly, I focused on the 4 criterion of MYP. I made the 4 units focused on those skills/criterion. A skill they need is to create art with excellent use of media or developing skills. I made a unit about copying the skills of famous artists. Responding to art is another skill they would need. I made a unit about propaganda and how it affected people from the historical perspective. Then I created a unit on artwork and how to write about your artwork. These 2 units would address responding to art and thinking creatively. The whole year would focus on famous artists, but the 4 MYP criterion would be addressed and the DP skills would be introduced at a basic level. In Unit 1, I chose to incorporate the elements of art, principles of art, and composition types because the unit would be a knowledge and understanding unit. I thought this was best to review this kind of information in the beginning unit. When creating a unit, I don't necessarily start at the beginning. I have to begin with the end in mind, so I usually work on assessments portion first. In this unit, the assessment will be a compare and contrast diagram and an original artwork combining 2 artistic styles. Both of these assessments require scholars to compare and contrast artists. Now that I know what my assessments will be, I go back up to stage 1 and look at creating my statement of inquiry. The statement of inquiry is composed of the global context, the key concepts, and the related concepts. It's kind of like A plus B plus C equals D. If I choose the right ones, I can put them together to create the statement of inquiry. Because my students are going to compare and contrast different artists, I chose personal and cultural expression as the global context. Because I want them to show the relationship between ideas like line, shape, space, I chose relationships as the key concept. Because I know they're going to present their findings and they're going to explore artists from different genres, I chose presentation and genre as the related concepts. Putting these 3 things together, I developed the statement, when expressing or presenting ideas that connect, it is better to stand out and be wrong than hide and be right. This statement will allow students to debate whether it is better to be right or wrong, whether it's better to be loud or quiet, and relate that to artists that they're studying and how those artists chose to speak out about their work and through their artwork. I turned the statement of inquiry into a debatable question. Is it better to be right and quiet or wrong and loud? And is one style of art better than another style? I start with the debatable questions because they are what I want my students to build up to with my conceptual questions. The conceptual questions should help build to the debatable questions, and my factual questions should build up to answer the conceptual questions. It's always better to begin with the end in mind, so I'll start with my debatable questions and work back to my factual questions. You want to review the basic things that all art teachers should be teaching at every level, like elements and principles of art. I put these in the very first unit. I also want to stretch scholars to new concepts like genres and composition types. These 4 sets of things will enable scholars to talk intelligently about art, compare and contrast a variety of things using correct vocabulary. I like to work on my vocabulary section next because knowing the words I want the kids to understand helps me develop what kinds of things I want them to be able to do. In this unit, I want them to know the elements of art, the principles, the composition types, and some of the genres of art that we will focus on directly. I want them to know certain things, and then after I know what I want them to be able to be skilled at certain things. In this unit, I want them to be skilled at describing artwork's subject matter, analyzing artwork in terms of elements and principles in composition, identifying the genre of artwork. I want them to be able to use all three of these things to compare and contrast and then combine artistic styles together. In the interdisciplinary connection section, I try to think about skills that both the art teacher and other teachers should be working on in terms of this unit. I know in an English class they analyze texts in terms of genre, and we're going to do artwork in terms of genre, so that was a logical connection. I know in history classes they have to compare and contrast different perspectives of history, and I know that's a good connection because we'll be comparing and contrasting artworks. In technology class, they use a similar cycle to us. They call it the design cycle. And in art, we call it the creative cycle. In this cycle, they research, plan, create, and then evaluate the products they produce. We will both be using this similar cycle in both our classes. As we move on to working on rubrics, for the two projects I've chosen to make both the rubrics Knowledge and Understanding, or Criterion A. You want to use all four criterion twice over the course of the year, so I've organized it to use it twice in particular units, but I have different projects based on this Criterion A. The way I do my rubrics is I have a side-by-side rubric. On one side it shows the IB objectives written exactly they are in the IB guide, and then a separate column I can copy and paste those objectives and then edit them for the more specifics to that project. I work on the excellent portion first, which is the 7-8 level. After I get the wording the way I like it there, I can just copy in and paste it to the boxes on top and adjust the bolded wording. Change excellent to substantial, adequate to limited, etc. There's a place on the rubric for students to grade themselves, that's the S column, and then for teachers to grade students, that's the T column, and there's also space at the bottom for teacher comments. As I told you before, I don't always do things in order. The next place I would go is the daily lesson plan of Stage 3. In this area, it requires me to state my learning objective, key point, and assessment summary for each day of this unit. Try to think of incremental steps to accomplish goals. After I fill in these three areas, it makes it easier for me to go back to the upper area of Stage 3. Make sure your learning objective always has a number in it to make it more measurable. In your key points area, list either the vocabulary or specific information you expect kids to walk out the door and know. In the assessment summary, tell what you're going to do to assess whether they've learned the objective for the day. This could be an actual physical assessment like a quiz, or it could be you walking around the room to do a visual assessment. Another good assessment in this area could be a reflection, because kids need to write in their process journal. Remember, the process journal is a record of how they came from an idea to a sketch to a finished product and to a reflection or evaluation of that product. It records the process of the artwork. The way I put together day 1, day 2, day 3 of this unit is the students will learn something like the elements of art, and then after they've learned a couple of these things, they will practice comparing and contrasting using the things they've been taught in prior lessons. If they were taught the elements of art, when comparing and contrasting, they're expected to use the elements of art in that practice. If they were taught the principles of art the next, they are expected to use both the principles of art and the elements of art in the next compare and contrast practice. The first compare and contrast practice involves them looking at two painters who have different styles. The second compare and contrast practice involves them looking at two architects with different styles. In the last compare and contrast practice, they look at two sculptors who have different styles. In the final practice, they have to use the elements of art, the principles of art, and the composition types. After these 3 practices, they are expected to start their compare and contrast project on their own with assistance from the teacher. They essentially have 4 days to complete their project. They have a research day, a planning day, a working day, and then a reflection/evaluation day. A 5th day is set aside for them to present their projects to the class and debate their statement of inquiry as a class. After the first presentation day, they'll have 4 days again to complete their original artwork. Just like the last time, they have a research day, a planning day, a working day, and an evaluation day. A last day is set aside for them to present their artwork to the class and again debate the statement of inquiry as a class. I'm going to go back to the upper area of Stage 3. In the Approaches to Learning section, you must pick a couple of approaches to learning that are in the IB guide. Pick ones that you can directly relate to the experiences your students will have in the classroom during this unit. In the differentiation area, set aside room for ELL scholars, special needs scholars, and gifted and talented scholars. State practices in all 3 that directly relate to the assessments and learning experiences your scholars will have in the class, and what things you will modify or accommodate for these 3 sets of students. In the Learning Experience and Teaching and Strategies area, day by day list what learning experiences you plan for your students. It must be a day-specific thing. Tell them you're going to use a gallery walk in day 1, and that you're going to use a sketch-it activity in day 9. In the Formative Assessment area, go to your assessment summary at the end of your day's lessons and list all the things you've planned to assess your students' learning objectives. You can literally copy and paste the assessment summary into the formative assessment area. Formative assessments are assessments that are given while students are forming the information. These are not end assessments, they are day-by-day assessments. Finally, go to the Reflections section. Ideally, you should reflect before the unit starts, during the unit, and after the unit is all taught. There are guided questions to help you reflect on each stage of your unit. Make sure you do this before you submit a unit to the Uplift for evaluation. Quality reflections require that you really think through what things could have gone better as you did this unit, or more connections that could have been made to other disciplines.